still thinking about cognitive operators. This slightly speculative system that Newberg and D'Aquili came up with for explaining how the brain takes raw data and turns it into the stuff of experience by carrying out relatively scripted processes upon that data to, well, just to do various things with it. I won't go through the whole list again. And the one I've just been thinking about is the existential operator, which I think came late in the development of these ideas, which, as I say, are highly speculative and contested. But my understanding of the existential operator is that it's that subroutine in the software of our brain, if you like, which takes a sensory input, or perhaps takes the collation of other processes, and then decides whether the thing that you're experiencing is real or not. So it distinguishes real objects in the physical world from imaginings and hallucinations and mirages and all those kind of things. So whilst I'm looking at this tree, there's all sorts of cognitive operations going on, binding operations so that I can see it as a tree, not as a series of fragments, but also reductive operations which allow me to see the branches, the leaves, the bark, to make that kind of reductive analysis of it. Causal operations which allow me to place it within a kind of botanical history, if you like, so I can kind of imagine where it's coming from and where it's going, and other kinds of operations. But at least in the schema that I'm looking at right now, there's also an existential operator, which is giving this tree an unavoidable sense of realness. I'm under no doubt that's a real tree, and that lack of doubt in these terms is a product of the workings of the existential operator. Other things I'm less sure about. If I close my eyes, I can see all sorts of weird shapes and lights and flashings and things moving, and I can kind of feel similar cognitive operations going on. I can see whole shapes, I can see broken up shapes, I can see patterns and so on forming and breaking up, but there's no sense of realness about them for me, very little sense of realness about them, which I assume means that the existential operator is assigning them to a category of the imaginary. The reason why I'm talking about this actually has nothing to do with trees or what happens when you close your eyes. It's really to do with something I was thinking about a while ago in relation to art, actually, arts practice. Because certainly when let me just see if I can get this right. Certainly there's a very, very clear distinction between looking at an object, a piece of art, and looking at an object that isn't. Most art objects self-advertise their status. There's all sorts of conventions which delineate them as art. They're in frames, there are certain kinds of techniques that we use in their creation, and so on. So they do self-advertise themselves as art objects, but some don't. Some minimalist artworks, some conceptual artworks, artworks of just found objects. Sometimes these objects and events, if they're live works, don't self-advertise their existence. They only become artworks because of their context, or their context. You would find them in certain places, or you'd read about them in certain places, or you'd be introduced to them in certain ways. And it's that framing which produces this status of the artwork that you're looking at. And I think certainly I'd had that experience where you're in an art gallery and you're wandering around and you're looking at the artworks, and each one is clearly advertising itself. No, it's not really advertising itself. Each one is clearly impacting you as an artwork. You're in no doubt that you're looking at an artwork as you move along the walls. And then you find yourself looking at the object at the end, and you think, hang on a second, I'm looking at a fire extinguisher, or I'm looking at one of those little meters that measures the water content of the air, that kind of thing. And you get that sudden little frisson of strangeness. So I think what's clearly happening in those cases, this is nice, just with an earpod. What's clearly happening, I think, in that is that there's something cognitive happening. The fact that you do get that sudden realization, it can't lie in the nature of the object. because found objects of all sorts do exist in galleries. Things that look a bit like fire extinguishers or look a little bit like hygrometers or whatever they're called. So it must lie in the operations of your brain ultimately. There is some kind of operation switching on and switching off at that moment, or which has been switched on and which has assigned these objects to a category called art, let's say, and then has mistakenly assigned this fire extinguisher to that category. And the reverse is true. You can, I've certainly had an experiences where you're looking at an object and have no particular relationship to it, and then you discover that it's an art object, and a different set of things kick into gear. It becomes assigned to a different ontological category through some kind of process, some sort of cognitive operation has taken place, and then a whole set of secondary operations take place beyond that, to do with what else is in that category, what kind of histories belong in that category, all that kind of stuff. The reason why I'm referring to this in relation to the existential operator is it seems to me there's some kind of relationship there. Certainly all artworks have that kind of unreal status, at least partially unreal. I mean, they are real, of course, they're real objects in the real world, particularly found objects, but they also have this slightly odd unreal object. And that's right across the arts, I think. Objects that you find on a stage stop being objects and start being props, even though they're exactly the same object. Words that you find in a poem stop being simply kind of semiotic squiggles on a page which refer to objects and acquire some different kind of status. They kind of enter the realm of the imaginary at that point. Sounds that you hear in an auditorium, and I'm thinking here of John Cage's 4 minutes 33 seconds of silence. Sounds that you hear in an auditorium become music through some kind of act of cognitive redesignation of that experience. And I think you're redesignating into the realm of the imaginary. It might be that what's happening at that point is something like an existential operator. And as I say, Newberg and D'Aquili's work is not terribly well supported, but something like that must be going on. There must be some kind of cognitive operation that is either awarding this experience the category of part of the physical material primary world, if you like, or alternatively are doing this other thing where the experience is part of an imaginary second order experience, picture of a thing, some words about things, poems, artworks, pieces of music, pieces of theatre. I'd love to see what happens if you could stick somebody in an fMRI machine and do these kind of here's this art test with them. I like to do it myself, actually.